XNA is a set of tools that Microsoft produced to help developers make great games on the Xbox. What many people don't know is how XNA got started. Xbox had agreed to do the keynote at the Game Developers Conference. Our plan was to announce the Xbox 360, but we couldn't because we were still debating the billion-dollar memory question. Given that we had to do something, we decided to launch XNA.
That may not sound like much. Well, wait till you hear it.
Let's not keep them waiting.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senior Vice President, Microsoft Corporation, Robbie Bach.
Xbox shipped in November of 2001. Planning on the next version of the console, the Xbox 360, had already begun. We had figured out at this point that one reason Xbox wasn't doing as well as the PlayStation is that we were late. Game developers had already optimized their game to the Sony platform, and since the games run better on the platform you ship on first, we were at a disadvantage.
Here at E3, PlayStation 2 is dominating the show with over 200 new games.
With the Xbox 360, we had to be first. Part of the 360 planning was figuring out what we could do to make the Xbox more successful in the next generation. Myself and one other engineer started working on a proposal that we codenamed Neo. It was a tools proposal that eventually led to XNA. I started my research by reading through 960 man-years worth of postmortem data on games and technology across the industry. A postmortem is exactly what you think. After shipping, you gather data from the team to understand what went well and what could go better for the next project. Then, when you work on the next game, you don't repeat those mistakes. You make all new ones. I looked at every single postmortem at Microsoft, even those that weren't related to games. I then scoured the industry and read everything I could find. Game postmortems can be harder to find because a lot of companies don't like to talk about what didn't go well on their projects publicly. To give you an idea of what a postmortem might reveal, this is a slide from a postmortem Xbox presented at GDC regarding the infamous Xbox controller. Chubbiest controller indeed. After reviewing all of the postmortems, we wrote a white paper proposal for what Neo could be. We were asserting three key things. The first was that Microsoft was better at software than they were at hardware. If you take a look at the original Xbox and our industrial design, you can tell that we were not yet a juggernaut at making hardware. It takes time to build up that knowledge base, and we weren't on par with Sony or Nintendo yet. The second point was that the technology had reached the point where it was possible to make standardized engines and game tools. If you've written a great set of tools for the Xbox, they will still be valuable for the 360 with some modifications.
Software makes all the difference. I believe, like with this generation of consoles, that hardware is not going to matter as much as in the past. It's mostly going to be about tools.
As hardware gets more and more powerful, there are more things like that individual developers won't use because they don't have the time or the skills to understand how to use them properly. So it's really valuable if software can wrap that up and present it as something that just works.
And the third thing, which is still true today, is that content is king. If we had standardized tools included with our development kit, we thought it would help developers to make content quicker and better for our platform.
What we've learned is that the way you get a great game is by having time to iterate on the content. So for us, it's really taking the 80% that people are spending time on the boilerplate code and inverting that so they're spending 80% of their time on iterating their game. The problem that happens in game development is so many people spend time working on that boilerplate code. By the time they realize what's fun about the game, like what makes it unique and cool, it's too late.
In order to get a project like this kicked off in a big company, you need to talk to a lot of people. You go around and you set up formal and informal meetings. You find out what everyone thinks about the proposal and you iterate on it before you start development. To do a project like this, we were going to need a lot more people and some funding. So going around and getting support and building momentum is really important if you want to get it kicked off. My first stop was talking to people in Xbox that might use the game engine. That meant spending time with my previous team in Microsoft Game Studios. When I walked around to talk to the different team members, I found out there wasn't a lot of interest in our proposal. One of the first things you learn when making a game is that taking on dependencies to your project adds risk. In this case, a game team that signed on would be dependent on our coders to make the engine. So if an internal team already had a great game engine, they were less likely to sign on to our idea. For some people, their concern was more personal. They had been burned by a shared technology called GameOS. I was the producer on Crimson Skies, and we were using some of the GameOS tech, so it made sense for me to try to help out on both projects. The challenge is that the team leaders on GameOS weren't as customer-oriented as the customers wanted them to be. The game teams using the tech wanted a published plan with dates, and they wanted input on those plans. I tried to resolve it, and eventually I realized that I wasn't going to be able to get everyone to agree. I went to management and I told them we had this challenge, that the game teams wanted more out of this team and the team didn't want to give them more. And then I asked them, well, what would you like me to do? They moved me off the project. It turns out that if you take the people off the project that are actually trying to solve the conflict, it's not like the conflict just goes away. And it didn't, and eventually the GameOS tools were retired. Well, I think except for the software rasterizer. For some of the engineers I spoke to, it was more about them wanting to write their own game engines. They didn't say that directly, but that was actually the issue. If you haven't worked in the games industry, you may think that every single person working in games loves playing them. Well, that isn't true. Some people just love working on the cutting edge of technology. The debate between using a game engine versus writing your own is still one that goes on today. The truth is that it depends.
Well, that's always been, the big age-old problem of game development. It's how much time do you spend on your tools and technology, and then how much time do you spend on your game design.
At this point, I was the director of the Xbox Advanced Technology team and part of the leadership team on Xbox. The leadership team liked the proposal, but they had a problem. They didn't want game developers to use our engine on other platforms like Sony or Nintendo. Xbox at this point is not winning. We just launched. Sony is clearly winning. Game developers are not going to reduce their audience significantly simply to use our tools. I must have written and presented about 50 slide decks at this point. I would walk around, I would get feedback, I would incorporate it, and then I would talk to everyone again. I could see my future as a salesperson was totally in jeopardy at this point. It was sad. I could not get people to agree to be a part of it. So it was time for a plan B. ATG was in a very unique position because we had designers and artists on our team. This meant we had talent that could work on a demo or game tech with our engineers. So we did. We started a Skunkworks project. We codenamed it GEMS, and we started making the tech and a demo. At the same time that all of this was going on, we had gone out to the advisory board and we were talking about our specifications, and they didn't like them. They felt the 360 did not have enough memory, and they thought we should fix it. Adding more memory to the box was a huge decision, a billion-dollar decision. So the discussion at this point was not resolved. But we had the GDC keynote coming up, and we were going to have to talk about something. So we were left with a few possibilities. One, we could tell the GDC team that we were just not going to do the keynote, but it was super late, and we didn't feel that that was fair to them. Second, we could announce our specifications and then potentially change them. Also not a great option. Or we could talk about something else. We launched XNA. Here's the thing. Everyone that loves gaming, everyone is going to be paying attention to this keynote. They're expecting us to come on stage and wow them with some amazing new hardware. And we're going to announce tools? Is there anything more boring than game tools? Okay, I admit, I love game tools. As a producer, you know they can make or break your game. But most people could care less. It's like talking about the electrical wiring in your house. But we really have two problems. How do you get people excited about your tools when you don't even have agreement about what XNA is? All we have is a little bit of code. Most people don't even know we're working on it. It's a mess. So we're still figuring out what it is. We can't show a sexy piece of hardware. So what are we going to do on stage? Well, luckily, we've done this before. Maybe you remember these. Right after launching Xbox, ATG started on the next set of demos targeted for the Xbox 360 launch. Similar to a game publisher, you sign up as much content as you can afford, knowing some games will never ship. So we cast a wide net to see what we could land in the boat. There was this one with Jim Cameron. Meeting him was every bit as awesome as you might imagine. I was sad when that demo didn't make it. Then there was this one, which was a collaboration between our team and another team. It also didn't make it. In the end, we landed on 3 demos. The first was Xenomorph from High Voltage. You may know them from their collaboration with Epic on Fortnite. They've been around since the 90s, which if you know anything about game companies, that's a long time for a game company to survive. This is Ava, and she is the star of the second demo, Film Noir. This demo was done by our internal ATG team. It's funny because during rehearsal I found a timing bug. If you hit both triggers at exactly the same time, the demo crashed. Hilariously, I was the only person able to reproduce the bug, and of course it happened on stage. I had a second machine and simply picked up the other controller and kept going. Nobody in the audience ever noticed. We used this demo to brand the entire show. Xbox was everywhere. Ava was everywhere. Everything was Film Noir themed. We even bought the stairs. The last demo was Crash, and it was truly the star of GDC. David, a genius at physics and graphics, and his incredible team at Pseudo made this one. This demo saved the day because it was awesome. People loved it. It was simple. You crash the Celine and you get a score. We have our visuals, but we still don't know what XNA is. It's a little bit of an advantage that we didn't know exactly what we were doing because it meant we could get developer input early. And we did. We got testimonials about what they thought it should be and what they liked about what we already had.
What I found in this industry is that we're reinventing the wheel over and over again just to try to get that extra 10% of triangles through the engine.
We have our visuals, we have talented developers talking about our tools. Now we just need one more thing, and that was a name. ATG liked the name GEMS. It stood for Game Engine Modules. The idea behind GEMS was that it was kind of a choose-your-own-adventure technology stack. You could take the tools and the technology that you wanted and leave the rest behind. The rest of Xbox didn't like it, so they hired someone to come up with a name.
Naming is the worst part of marketing. It's the hardest thing. Nobody ever 100% loves the name. Ever. Ever.
And that is where XNA came from. That hand gesture was hilarious. I thought it was adorable that even Gabe did the gesture. I can't recall if he started it. After the keynote, to wrap up the day, we had a Film Noir-themed party. The parties at GDC are legendary. Obtaining tickets to the big platform parties is one of the mini games of the show. We had free food, drinks, music, dancing, gaming. At the door, you were greeted by Ava. She was a holographic, which at the time was state-of-the-art technology. She was funny and engaging.
You know what, Chris? You can say anything you want to me. I'm virtual.
I think our launch worked, and we won GDC that year. I think this magazine cover was exactly what we wanted. We had ended the console war with tools. Yeah, that didn't happen. People talked about that GDC for a long time, and XNA did end up becoming a real product. Awesome developers like Frank were kept on, and many great games were made with XNA. As for me, I left the Xbox team and went back to work in Microsoft Game Studios on Gears of War. I knew the guys at Epic, we worked well together, and so it was the most useful thing I could do. We really needed another exclusive title that would be a hit for the 360. As for XNA, the project at Xbox was closed down in 2014, but it still lives on as FNA, and just recently made headlines when the Terraria developers gave them additional funding in response to the Unity kerfuffle. I love the XNA story because it's inspiring to know that if you persist through failure, sometimes it works out.